Well, hello. Here's another one of my yes or no questions, important questions for which there are two sides. This one is Pope Francis on the right track? Well, I guess as everyone knows, Pope Francis was elected to the papacy in March of 2013, so that's what, 7.5 years ago. It's been a momentous time for him. And when he became Pope, he inherited quite a big collection of problems of different sorts. And he has decided that he was going to confront them, try to put them right, and he has met with varying degrees of success. And as a consequence of that, there are many who feel that he's gone too far, those that he hasn't gone far enough, that he has been justified in pursuing the changes and remedies that he's evidently been after, and those who say he shouldn't have been doing that. So if there was ever something on which there were two sides, this is a good one. Okay, let's begin to examine that diversion between the two. First of all, those would say yes, Pope Francis is on the right path. Well, I guess a starting point is the question of the Church's stance on gays, and not only on gays themselves, but on the whole notion of whether gays can be married, can have civil unions, and so forth. This is certainly a subject which is timely simply because, for a variety of reasons, attitudes in many parts of the world, certainly in the UK and the US, have changed dramatically just in the last few decades, just dramatically. It's certainly within my lifetime that it was illegal, an imprisonment offense in Britain to be engaged in homosexual sexual activity, and now it's almost a shrug. Similarly, in America, particularly the religious right has railed against it over the years, and that's throttled way back to the point where about 30 years ago, the vast majority of Americans condemned homosexuality. Now the vast majority of Americans don't really care. They certainly say there's no reason to oppose it. So this is probably an area that has seen the biggest social change in attitude in my lifetime, and the Vatican is right in the middle of that. So, as was widely reported, on a plane flight back from Brazil, about 4 months after he was elected to the papacy, when asked by a reporter whether there was a gay cabal in the Vatican, an entertaining question, he said something like, if a man is gay, if he loves God and is a man of goodwill, who am I to judge? And of course, that statement really caused consternation. I mean, at the very beginning of his papacy, what he was saying was that he was not going to condemn homosexuality. And when I first heard it, my attitude was, wait a minute, he is the man to judge, he's the Pope. But I guess what he was saying is, who am I to judge in the sense of who am I to condemn? And so that really kind of started the ball rolling. And of course, the question of attitudes towards gays in general, gay sex in particular, and so forth, has been made all the more dramatic by the anomalous position of there being a great many gay men who are priests, who are certainly in the curia, who are cardinals, archbishops, and so forth, at the same time that the church condemns homosexuality, and in the famous words of Francis's predecessor, calls it disordered. So he's got a problem deciding what to do about the church's stance. And he's addressing it. Good for him. That's why it's the number one argument for yes, he's on the right track. He's doing something about this anomalous position. The second point has to do with financial corruption and the Vatican Bank. The Vatican Bank has had a history of lurid scandals, allegedly laundering mafia drug money. From time to time, they have sought to bring in outside accountants to take a look at the finances and so forth, and one by one they've quit because they couldn't get cooperation from the cardinals in the Vatican, who were able to pretty much prevent them from looking too carefully. So there is something pretty awful there, and when Francis was elected, right away, one of the options he actually considered was closing down the bank. It was so dreadful. One also suspects perhaps that his predecessor may have quit out of his frustration and fear and depression about not being able to do anything about the Vatican's finances, and in particular where the money in the Vatican Bank came from. So he's having a go at that. He last year pronounced that there would be external audits of the bank. Up until now, they have touted the fact that the bank's records and assets and so forth would be audited, but always by internal auditors. Well, now there are external auditors. That's a big movement. And of course, this whole business of finance continues. There has been a recent financial scandal of dodgy middlemen. A cardinal had to resign over a big property investment in London. A bit of uncertainty as to where that money even came from, et cetera, et cetera. So once again, he's trying to do something about the finances, and not before time, because according to some reports, the Vatican is in a bit of a financial squeeze and is in danger of running out of money, according to some. So don't know how true that is, but anyway, that's another reason why he's on the right track. Number three is the whole question of child abuse. And it was a subject that certainly 2 popes ago, John Paul II didn't want to know. He just ignored it, covered it up, and so forth. And to a certain extent, so did Francis's predecessor, Benedict. Francis is more upset about it, has published tougher rules. Catholic parishes are now required to call the police when there's grave suspicion of child abuse. It was never that way before. And of course, that very requirement has itself engendered some pretty fierce opposition, because of course it makes the church look bad every time one of these things happens. And so once again, he's on the right track by trying to get tougher about this. He can only move so fast, I suppose one might say. So, but nonetheless, the emergence of new child abuse scandals has diminished, perhaps disappeared. I don't recall having heard of any recent examples of current abuse being exposed, but maybe there are some. There probably are some, but haven't come to light yet. Well, those are some pretty good arguments why he is on the right track. And I suppose in an overarching sort of way, you might say something like this: the church requires devout Catholics to observe, to participate in the sacrament of confession in order for them to be absolved of their sins. And confession is a kind of three-stage process. It involves the first one is acknowledging and realizing that you have sin, identifying the sin. Number two, it involves the confession itself, which is admitting that something must be done. And number three, some sort of atonement and putting it right at the end. Well, one might justifiably say, why can't the church do the same thing? And those who think he's on the right track would say he's moving them in that direction. So there it is, some pretty powerful arguments for saying Francis is on the right track. Well, let's look at some of the negatives. What are some of the reasons some people would say, no, he isn't, I'm sorry? Well, for much of it, I think, has to do with emotional attachment to the past. An argument might go something like this. The church has been my life. It has provided me with great comfort and solace. It's a haven of help for my tribulations, my worries, anything that goes wrong in my life. The church is there for me. It helps me get through things. And here's this new chap who wants to damage it, who wants to belittle it. Well, we simply can't have that, can we? I think similarly, there's a kind of devotion to tradition. The church has been in many respects unchanged. It's had the Latin language from almost since its inception, Greek kind of in the early days, but after Jerome it was Latin all the way, and the traditionalists would prefer to still have it that way because it gives you a feeling of being attached to the past, to the long-standing tradition of this great institution, and it's quite a sad thing to try and to betray that, to walk away from it. And then finally, in a general sort of way, a devout Catholic might say, look, the church is very important to me. It's a big part of my life. I don't want anybody attacking it. And that's what he's doing. He's attacking it. He says he's a holy man. He's the Pope. He's only trying to make the church a better place. I see him as an implacable enemy of the church, and therefore I simply cannot accept the fact that he's on the right path. Well, there's one final argument which supports the idea that he's not on the right track, which goes in the opposite direction, which says, well, he's not doing enough. And in fact, he should be doing too much, far more. He's too timid. He's not pushing the exposure of the child abusers. Perhaps many are in the Vatican themselves. He can only go so far with these things. He hasn't addressed the whole subject of contraception and the overpopulation in the world and what it's doing to the finite resources of the earth. One suspects that he's kind of falling in with the traditional view, which in itself is kind of suspect. One wonders, why they hang on to this so much, particularly in this current era when there are so many more people as there once, far more than there once were when this was not such a big issue. Pope Francis has been quite adamant that he's simply not going to touch contraception. That's a no-go area. So he's not doing enough. Another reason why he doesn't deserve our support. Well, those are some certainly emotionally charged reasons for not supporting him. And let's examine what my take is on it. Well, my view is that I support Pope Francis and what he's trying to do. Um, you can look at it from the standpoint of conscious, conscience and moral authority. What he realizes is that there are a number of issues within the church which he simply can't countenance. He can't, as a man upholding the will of God and as the vicar of Christ, he simply can't ignore. So there is that view. He has to do the right thing. There's also he has to wear a kind of a marketing hat. He has to think about his target markets, and as it is, his most desirable market segments are the more educated, more affluent members of the West, in Europe in particular, but to a lesser extent in the U.S. And he's losing them. The seminaries are empty, or certainly less full than they once were. The In the dramatically Catholic places like Ireland, the church's position has declined precipitously. The You have only as a tourist to enter the wonderful churches in Spain, Italy, Germany, and so forth, and see basically old ladies in them. The churches are simply not populated anymore to a great extent in the West. And there has been a big decline in the U.S., although not as great. So, if anything, if the church wants to survive financially, it has to resume its support from these parts of the population. And I would think that the path that he is on would go a long way toward doing it. So as a strategist, as a strategy consultant for the Pope Francis, I would say right on, and God bless you and good luck. Okay, well, that's my position. Pretty straightforward, I think. And of course, as we come across he's an 84-year-old man in December. He doesn't look too healthy to me, so there is going to be a new pope. Of course, the longer he lasts, the more of his people will be voting for the next one, as the old guard retire because of the age limitation. So we're not only talking about Francis's stewardship of the job, but that of his successor as well. So carry on, Francis, and I hope your successor will too. Okay, that's my view. Give me a like if you liked it, and a notification. Give me any ideas you have for a new one, and thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye.